Hello everyone and welcome to another Pittsburgh Ultramatic service video. Today we're going to be talking about the differences, the similarities and differences between the 55th and the 56th front pumps. They are easily confused. Most people have no idea what they're looking at, and understandably so, because the differences are very obscure. So first we should recall that I have some converters over here. Recall that we have a few shafts on the converter. We have the stub shaft, the reactor shaft, and then you have an input shaft that goes inside. The input shaft itself is hollow. This stub shaft is connected to the converter pump, not to be confused with the front pump. This is the pump of the converter, which is ultimately connected straight to the engine. So this thing spins whenever the engine spins. This reactor shaft is actually held stationary inside the front pump housing at all times. You need that for the reactor to work properly. Now, the reactor is not always stationary because there's a sprag clutch inside, but this is always held stationary. And then you have the input shaft, which actually takes the output from the converter, whether it's the converter output or the direct drive output, and goes, into the rest of the transmission and the rest of the drive line. So we can recall that, and then also we need to recall that there's three circuits for the converter. We have the converter in, which is always between the, it goes in these holes here, always between the stub shaft and the reactor shaft. And then you have a converter out circuit and a direct drive circuit. One of them goes between the reactor and the input shaft, and the other one goes inside the hollow input shaft itself. So let's go over to our pumps here. And I also have a bell housing. So we can go over the similarities first. The circuits on the bell housing side are all the same. We have here, this is our front pump output, the gallery pressure, in other words. This is our takeoff here. We have our front pump in. Now there's two different ones that both connect up here. It's because one of them is our suction and the other one is recirculation. I might have gotten those backwards with this one to this one, but it doesn't matter really. On this here, you have your high range clutch and your direct drive clutch going right in there. And then, let's see here. So, on the pumps themselves, again, the rotors and stuff, they use some of the same on both 55 and 56. There's different types, but you can't depend on that. There's service letters to tell you which one is which. If you look at the side of the front pump, these two holes here, the upper hole is the output going into the transmission cooler. The lower hole is coming back from the transmission cooler. You will also note there's this bushing inside, sort of a triple bushing. You have three bushing areas and you have two grooves in between. You can see that notch in there, that hole, that elongated hole inside the groove that is nearer to us. That always comes from our return from the transmission cooler. Likewise for that little pinhole there, that's always there. It comes from the return line. The last thing that's the same, you have your direct drive clutch circuit, or sorry, not the direct drive, the high range clutch circuit. So, corresponding to these holes, you have, oh wait, I got this wrong here. It's not, which one is it? This is our, oh, no, that was right. Okay, so it's this hole here, and this hole here is what goes into the pump. But, big deal, you have those two there. These two are what come actually from the case, and from the valve body, and then these two go into the pump. So, no different there. Anyway, like I said, high range and direct. You can see our high range on both 55 and 56 goes through this channel and then into a cord passage. The cord passage goes to a check valve, and then eventually it goes out through that hole right there. I think there's one on the other side of the pump as well or something, or maybe there's only one hole. I kind of forget. Yeah, there's only one hole. There's two on the, at least two on the high range clutch body itself. But we just have that one hole going originally from here. So our differences are due to the fact that between the reactor and the input shaft is direct drive on 55 and converter out on 56. Likewise, the inside of the input shaft is converter out on 55, direct drive on 56. So as you can see on this 56th one, our direct drive goes through this channel and into a cord passage. I'll come back to that. On our 55th, we have the same channel, but there's no cord passage, and instead it goes out through this hole. So for these cover plates here, you can tell them apart. You look at this notch, the 56th has no hole, the 55th has a hole. Likewise, looking at the pump body itself, 56th has a hole, 55th no hole. Likewise for this hole, it's the same, and you can sometimes see these chamfered. 56th, there's a hole, 55th, no hole. The last difference is in our bushing itself. Now, let me zoom back out. Remember this one that I pointed out originally? If it'll show up again. Hold on here. Come on. There we go. We can see it there. That will always be in the same location, 55 to 56. But the groove in our upper, our frontmost, or let me rephrase. The hole in our frontmost groove, the frontmost being this side, will have a different location and a different angle between the other one, 55 to 56. So 56, we can see that there's one basically facing straight up. So they go, they're at like a 135 degree angle. One of them's here, one of them's here. On the 55th, it's a 90 degree angle. One of them's here, one of them is here, I think. Let me double check. Right. Very important. So, very important to get the bushing correct and in the correct orientation. So, to further clarify why we have these differences, this is your direct drive, so it goes into here, which is actually this channel here, and then it goes around. It's a little confusing. So, it goes out of this hole, runs down this channel, and then it gets to here. It can't go past this bushing. Instead, it enters this area here, and because, you know, these splines, you know, fluid can pass past those. They're not like a seal or anything. So you actually have the fluid, when it enters here, ends up stuck between this bushing race and the topmost bushing race, and therefore it goes in between the reactor shaft and the input shaft. It can't go between the pump and the reactor shaft because hold on, let me think. Pump shaft is here. You have a in the pump stub shaft. Let me grab one of those. I have one somewhere. This is very complicated to explain. We have our bushing right here. So this is what keeps the circuits separated. We have our converter in circuit here, which gets past that bushing. So this bushing here seals between our reactor shaft and our stub shaft. Then this bushing also seals between the reactor to input shaft circuit and our pump to reactor shaft and our sub shaft to reactor shaft circuit. and then this bushing here. So it relies on 3 different bushings to keep itself in the right place. But the effect is the same, except that we need to get direct drive on one, we need to get converter out on the other. So the 55th, direct drive comes in here, and being trapped between those 3 bushings, it can't get past that, it can't get past that, and it can't get past that. Then you end up going in between the reactor shaft and the input shaft for your direct drive. On 56th, again, that is converter out. So we simply have a cord passage that goes from there right to there. Pretty easy. On the 55th, the converter out is the middle of the input shaft. Hold on, let me steady the camera. So that goes from our hole in the closer groove there to our top hole there. And that's why they are how they are. So I know this is a very sort of technical video, perhaps boring, but there's no explanation of this anywhere that describes it the way I just described it. Now, before anybody comments, well, I'm glad because it wasn't a good description. That's not what I meant. Trying to figure all this stuff out with just the transmission apart would be quite the pain. So even though this is a little technical, perhaps a little confusing with how I presented it, hopefully it'll be a good reference when these questions come up in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.